Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, back with another gear review, and this time it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the Zentor by Antelope Audio. Now, any of you who saw my review of the Orion Studio by Antelope will know I love their stuff. There are things you can do with their hardware and software interface that are very difficult, if not nigh on impossible, with other interface brands. So they've really got it going on. Now, the Zentor is the smaller, slightly more cuddly, slightly more portable version, and it is absolutely stunning. To say this thing is jam-packed full of features and I/O and all the normal goodies that we love at Pro Tools Expert is an absolute understatement. But they've done a really, really cool job. The packaging, as in the box itself and its features and its I/O and its controllability, are phenomenal. Second to none, I would even go as far as to say. So let's get up close and personal on the Zentor. I'll show you around it, take you through some of the features, take you through some of the stuff that they introduced to the range of Thunderbolt and USB interfaces. Some really cool stuff going on at Antelope right now. So yeah, let's dive in and get up close and personal. So starting off at the front of the Zentor, on the left-hand side, we have the two independently configurable headphone outputs, and we have the two reamp outputs. Now this is really cool. If you want to take a DI signal, send it off to a real amp, they've actually given you a load balanced reamp output. So it just works. There's no faffing around with levels. It just works. If we pan over to the right hand side of the Zentor, we see our four guitar or DI inputs. 4 inputs for guitars in a little box like this. Awesome. Now, of course, these can also be swapped over to line level inputs. So you've got an extra 4 line level inputs on the front for keyboards or backing track or iPod, whatever you fancy. On the back of the Zentor, we have our 4 microphone preamp inputs. These are on Combi XLRs with 1/4-inch TRS jacks as well for more line inputs. Our 4 outputs, 2 pairs of monitor outputs, SP diff, 8 line level outputs over 25-pin D sub, our Thunderbolt and USB connections, and the power supply connection. And on the left-hand side, we have our 2 sets, yes, 2 sets of ADAT optical inputs. Now, of course, if you're running at 44.1 or 48K, this gives us up to 16 channels of ADAT optical I/O. If you go up to 96, that cuts it down to 8, because doubling the sample rate halves the I/O count over this particular format. It's also worth knowing, with sample rates and things in mind, that the track count over Thunderbolt is different to that of USB. 32 channels of I/O over Thunderbolt and 24 over USB at 192K. So as well as being a powerhouse of connectivity, the Zentor is also a powerhouse of control. On the front bezel, we have this rather lovely design, these 2 aluminium strips, large LED touchscreen, we'll come on to that in a minute, 3 buttons, nice heavy dented controller pop, which is also a button, and our talkback mic button. Now, the little microphone down here is actually built into the logo, and if I touch it, I've got control over where my talkback mic goes, the monitors to headphone 1 or headphone 2. Yes, this little screen is a touch screen. Very, very cool indeed. Gain button takes me through my 4 preamps and my 4 guitar or instrument line-ins. I've then got control over the gain, selection mic or line. I can mute it. Very, very cool. Headphone, I can go between my 2 headphone ports, and the Antelope button. Now, at the moment, the Antelope button is configured to swap between monitor sets A and B on the 2 sets of 1/4-inch TRS jacks on the back. If I hit the menu button and go down to Antelope button, I can actually determine whether I'm going between A and B sets of monitors. I can mono the monitors, dim, latch, or dim hold. Very, very cool. Also in menu, I have control over the brightness of the screen, my interface type, screensaver, sample rate conversion, the moment it's on, and how I've saved my presets, which is very, very cool. Talking of presets, I have 5 preset buttons down here, and if I want to save one, all I have to do is hit it, and I've now saved a preset, which is very, very cool. Monitors, of course, I can do that from the front panel as well. Go between my line outputs, my headphones, swap between A and B, and I can select the sample rate. Now, the sample rate selection only works when you're not being controlled by a DAW. The DAW and the software control override the front panel. Now, I can also, by tapping on the screen, determine what I see. So at the moment, I'm seeing my analog ins, and you can probably see it. Occasionally this will flicker because I've got some mics attached. If I play back the track, you can see I'm only coming out of Thunderbolt outputs 1 and 2. And that's, of course, reflected in the output matrix. USB outputs, of course, I'm not connected via USB. ADAT inputs, SPDIF, AFX, mix lines 1 and 2. This is a seriously powerful little box. So if you, like me, are not a great fan of having to tap through to get to control my preamps, which is not major grief, but there's got to be an easier way of doing it. And of course there is, using the Zentor app for Android or iOS. So I've got my trusty iPad here. I'm going to start the Zentor app. Select the Zentor in question, connect to it. And now I have control over my mic pre's. Phantom power on. Very, very cool. I can also get in to change whether they're mic or line inputs. I've also got control over my high Z guitar DI inputs. Very, very cool. Very, very simple, but I really like that. Other cool things on the app, I've got control over my master headphone level for headphones 1 and 2, my monitor level and my monitor selection. Of course, if I'm not in DAW mode, I can change the sample rate, and I've got clock source selection. Now, why would they put clock source selection on the app? Well, there's a really good reason for that. Now, remembering, of course, that Antelope made their name in high quality audio clocks, you're going to want to use the internal clock as often as possible. But of course, when you're linking via ADAT, you need to use the ADAT sync source. So it's time to show off the third party piece of, well, in fact, all the Antelope Audio USB and Thunderbolt interfaces. They've really upped their game when it comes to the built-in effects. And with the help of a trusty Les Paul, we'll go through some of the new guitar amp simulators. This thing is very, very cool. Let's dive in. So as before on the review of the Orion Studio, what I've done is, using their incredible routing matrix thing, I've routed my preamp input number 2, which is where my guitar is plugged into on the second guitar input on the front of the Zentor. I've routed that down to AFX 2. Now I'll come to that in a minute. And then AFX 2 here is routed down to Thunderbolt Record 2. But what I've also done is drag the preamp down to record onto channel 3. So you can see here I've got the guitar input and the guitar DI on input number 3, meaning I'm recording a clean DI onto channel 3 and my dirty affected sound on to channel 2. Very, very cool if it comes to the point where I decide I'm not married to this particular tone. Now, diving over into the effects, AFX 1 was my bass sound. Come on, Antelope, we do need some bass amp simulators, please. I've used the Darkface 65 with a 1x12 cabinet with a combination of microphones. Again, this is all editable and tweakable. What I've also done is doved, who knows, into the compressors, the vintage compressor section, and dug out the FET A76. We all know what it's supposed to be. Here's my setting. I'm using a 4:1 ratio. The bass sounds really, really nice. Now over into AFX2 is where things get nasty. Guitar amps, we've got a stack load more of them. Dark Faces we had before. The Modern US is really nice. If we juice it up a little bit, let's go for a bit more maximum volume and maximum gain. Very, very nice indeed. We all know what it's trying to be. Let's choose some more. Let's go for the rock. Let's go for some Rock 22. Very, very nice. What else we got in here? The Tweed Deluxe does sound rather lovely. Yep, like that. But where things get really interesting is this bottom one. This is my favourite of the new ones, the Burn Sphere. Very, very nice and very usable. Now, of course, we can mess with a whole load of those guitar cabinets as well. Now I think for this particular track, that could be a little too much, but I quite like the vintage. Let's bring the gain down a tiny bit. Yeah, I like that. Might have to stick with that. Now, what I've also done on the bottom is use one of the new EQs. This is the pink EQ. I think we know where this is coming from. And I've wound in a little bit of high-pass filter. Just to get rid of some of that bottom end. Yep, liking that a lot. Now, of course, at any point I can still go back to my clean DI, but I'm really loving these new effects. Of course, I can keep adding them. There's a whole load of vintage EQs in there, the vintage compressor, the normal compressor, and normal EQ. To say normal, it's pretty feature-packed, if I'm totally honest. They really have done a great job on these, and when you consider they are actually included in the price, there's no extra purchase, they sound great. They're really usable. Yes, if you've got a whole stack of vintage Marshalls and vintage Fenders, you're probably going to find these not quite up to par, but quite frankly, for getting some basic tracking done, or actually in a track, you're going to find them really, really usable. So I think by now you can probably tell that I really like this thing. The build quality is excellent. You know, it looks really sexy. The brushed aluminium, all the labeling and everything looks really lovely. It's got a real quality feel to it. That's a good thing. The connectivity, phenomenal. The mic pre's sound great. Loads of digital I/O, loads of connectivity, loads of options. I love the fact that you've got 4 guitar stroke DI inputs. This could be your entire rehearsal in a box. In fact, I think it's probably designed to be your entire rehearsal in a box. One of the reasons I've only used 4 mics on the drums is because, quite frankly, for some types of music, you only need 4 mics on the drums. Glyn Johns did it on 3, and we're all after that big kind of John Bonham drum sound if we can get it. Sadly, my room's not quite big enough, but hey, I digress. They've done a fantastic job on this thing. I really like it. So if you're in the market for a small portable interface that's absolutely plastered in I/O, yes, I agree, the 8 analog outputs are over D-sub, but that's purely to keep the size of this thing down, I think. It's awesome. This is your rehearsal in a box. What else can I say? In fact, it's your recording studio in a box. That's the whole point. I'm struggling for anything bad to say about it. So the track, of course there's a track. There's always a track. In this case, I've kept it fairly simple. 4 drum mics, a pair of overheads, snare and kick mic using the 4 mic pre's on the Zen Tour. Then the bass is going through some of the bass effects, which I showed you earlier. And the guitar, which we messed around with, is just an outright sort of Gary Moore sound rip-off. Well, I'd like to think so anyway. If only I could play like he could. This thing's brilliant. Check it out at a music store near you. I've been James from Pro Tools Expert. Enjoy the track, and I'll see you again soon for some more gear talk. Such a lot to tell. I'm going downhill, and I blame myself. I've been